And let's go into the details of the major story of the day, ceasefire or the crossfire. Why? Because today all is set to have the stage in Saudi Riyadh. US and Russian officials met on Tuesday in Riyadh for the first talks on ending the war in Ukraine, as Kiev and its European allies watched anxiously from the sidelines. The talks in the Saudi capital underscored the rapid pace of US efforts to halt the conflict less than a month after President Donald Trump took office and 6 days after he spoke by phone to the Russian President Vladimir Putin. As we all know that the war between Russia and Ukraine is happening since 3 years, and there are no major things that has happened to halt this particular war. But ever since Donald Trump has resumed his office on Jan 20th, he has taken utmost care regarding the ceasefire of the two wars which is happening for more than 3 years, or approximately 3 years. Russia-Ukraine war is approximately going on since 3 years, whereas Israel-Hamas war is happening since more than a year. President Donald Trump, we can say, has succeeded in bringing Israel and Hamas to the ceasefire. But the only thing which is pending is Russia and Ukraine war. But both the cases are very much different. Why? Because Israel and Hamas are not two different countries. Israel is a country, whereas Hamas is an organization which has kidnapped the Israeli citizens, and from there the war has started between the two countries. But whereas here in Russian case, Russia and Ukraine are two major countries in European, and this particular war has started because of the US intervention by the previous government, because of the Ukraine's involvement in NATO, which was completely rejected by the Russian President Vladimir Putin. And since then, the war has been started. The then President Joe Biden has clearly indicated that probably Putin may attack Ukraine very soon, and immediately after couple of months later, after his announcement, the war is officially started, which means the previous President Joe Biden has not done enough to halt the war, because his motto is to include or to expand NATO to European countries, and the former country Ukraine, which was a part of USSR or the Russian Federation, he wanted to include it. But this is not the choice of Russian President. Russian President always wanted a greater Russian Federation cooperation, which means to include all the previous Russian countries or the Soviet Union countries back under one roof, to concede with NATO or to conquer the European Union is in his own way. He don't want NATO to expand at least to the Russian Federation countries. And so, ever since Donald Trump, even in Donald Trump before becoming the president, in his election campaign, he has kept saying that had he been the US president, the two major wars wouldn't have happened. He quoted both that Israeli and Hamas war wouldn't have started, and even Russia and Ukraine war also even started would have ended a long time back. He kept his words. Immediately after he was elected as the president way back in the last year, November 5th, changes have been taken place. He immediately called on the Israeli president Benjamin Netanyahu and always suggested to do enough for the ceasefire. Benjamin Netanyahu called Donald Trump the greatest friend of United States, or the greatest friend of Israel from United States, and said that he will be taking all the care. And somehow Donald Trump has succeeded in bringing the peace between Israel and Hamas. Hamas is releasing the prisoners what it has captivated from more than a year, and even Israel is releasing its prisoners of war. And step by step, the ceasefire is clearly seen. Whereas Russia and Ukraine case is little bit different. Both the prime ministers or both the presidents should be sitting to have a ceasefire. If not, both the officials should be sitting. But step by step, this particular process also has begun today. not in Russia or in United States or in Ukraine either, but in a different country of Saudi Arabia. Ever since President Donald Trump has resumed his office, his first choice clearly is Saudi Arabia. The first phone call what he has done is to the Saudi king. He is giving utmost importance to Saudi Arabia and decided Saudi Arabia as the venue for the peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. And prior to that, he wanted to create an environment so that he will be meeting the Russian president. And for that, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrived in Saudi Arabia's capital of Riyadh on Monday after his trip to Israel. He is leading a delegation to the kingdom for direct talks with Russian officials on ending Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. The trip to Saudi Arabia comes ahead of expected talks with Russian officials aimed at ending Moscow's nearly 3-year war in Ukraine. The talks come after President Donald Trump last week spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin by phone and ordered top officials to begin the negotiations on the war, which he repeatedly vowed to end his presidential campaign in Riyadh. Riyadh, which is also involved in talks with Washington over the future of the Gaza Strip, has played a role in early contracts between the Trump administration, which took office on January 20th, and Moscow, helping to secure a prisoner swap last week. గ్రాఫిక్ ప్లేట్స్ వచ్చి కింద But Ukraine and European leaders are worried that Trump could cut a hasty deal with Moscow that ignores their security interests, rewards Russia for invading its neighbor, and leaves Putin free to threaten Ukraine or other countries in the future. Critics say that Trump's team, by ruling out NATO membership for Ukraine and saying that Kiev's desire to win back all its territory is an illusion, has made major concessions in the advance. US officials say they are simply recognizing reality. Ukraine says no peace deal can be made on its behalf. He said that we as a sovereign country simply will not be accepting any agreements without us. Yes, this is indeed happening. Why? Because the present peace talks is always being concentrated on US and Russia. Even the next round of talks could be directly between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in the same Saudi Riyadh. And Zelensky will not be the part of that. In spite of repeated requests by Zelensky, Trump said that, or Trump literally, we can say indirectly, ignored Zelensky's request that no peace deal can be formed without their part. President Vladimir Zelensky said that in the last week in Germany. The Riyadh talks pit 3 US officials in the first month of their jobs: Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff against Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, in office since 2004, and veteran Putin aide Yuri Ushakov. Media were allowed to film the two delegations seated on opposite sides of the polished wooden table with large white floral arrangements. The officials ignored shouted questions from reporters asking whether the US was sidelining the Ukrainians and what concessions Washington was demanding of Moscow. On the other hand, European leaders insisted Monday they must have a say in international talks to end the war in Ukraine, despite the clear message from both Washington and Moscow that there was no role for them as yet in negotiation that could shape the future of the continent. 3 hours of emergency talks at Elysee Palace in Paris left leaders of Germany, United Kingdom, Italy, Poland, Spain, Netherlands, Denmark, NATO and the European Union without a common view on possible peacekeeping troops after a US diplomatic blitz on Ukraine last week threw once a solid transatlantic alliance into turmoil.
Peace agreement, but there must be a US backstop, because a US security guarantee is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again.
Hier wird über die Köpfe der Ukraine hinweg über das Ergebnis von Friedensgesprächen, die nicht stattgefunden haben und bei denen die Ukraine nicht Ja gesagt hat und nicht am Tisch gesessen hat, über mögliche Varianten von Ergebnissen gesprochen. Das ist höchst unangemessen, um es ganz offen und ehrlich zu sagen.
I am very concerned about making a fast ceasefire, because it can actually give Putin and Russia a better possibility to go back to Russia and to re-ramp and to mobilize again, attack Ukraine or...
Europe must play its role, and I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground alongside others if there is a lasting peace agreement. But there must be a US backstop, because a US security guarantee is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again.
Hier wird über die Köpfe der Ukraine hinweg über das Ergebnis von Friedensgesprächen, die nicht stattgefunden haben und bei denen die Ukraine nicht Ja gesagt hat und nicht am Tisch gesessen hat, über mögliche Varianten von Ergebnissen gesprochen. Das ist höchst unangemessen, um es ganz offen und ehrlich zu sagen.
I am very concerned about making a fast ceasefire, because it can actually give Putin and Russia a better possibility to go back to Russia and to re-ramp and to mobilize again, attack Ukraine or...
Europe must play its role, and I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground alongside others if there is a lasting peace agreement. But there must be a US backstop, because a US security guarantee is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again.
Hier wird über die Köpfe der Ukraine hinweg über das Ergebnis von Friedensgesprächen, die nicht stattgefunden haben und bei denen die Ukraine nicht Ja gesagt hat und nicht am Tisch gesessen hat, über mögliche Varianten von Ergebnissen gesprochen. Das ist höchst unangemessen, um es ganz offen und ehrlich zu sagen.
I am very concerned about making a fast ceasefire because it can.
Those were the visuals we have just seen about the European Union leaders and presidents or the leaders of the
I want
different
to thank
countries
President
belonging to the
Macron.
European Union speaking about Russia and Ukraine conflict. But the thing what we can notice now is that important at all? Is that considered at all? Russia and Ukraine both are the countries belong to European Union only, but so far the European Union or any country in Europe has not played a major role or an effective role that could have ended the war. And simply everybody waited for the new president of United States. If at all Donald Trump wouldn't have won, then probably this particular war between Russia and Ukraine could be never ending. This is what we can surely say, that Donald Trump, after becoming the president, has really done a great job in bringing both the wars to a pause. It's not completely faded out, or it's not completely over, it's not completely ceasefire has happened, but yes, at least the talks are started. Once upon a time in the world, after United States, UK was a global power. We are talking about the days after the collapse of Soviet Union. Once upon a time, as we all know, that USA and USSR are the two global powers, and the world was divided literally between the two countries, and India a part of the non-aligned movement, and the rest of the world which were not a part of USA group and USSR group formed a different group called the NAM. But whatever might be, after the collapse of the Soviet Union or the USSR and the formation of Russia, Russia has become a very poor country, and later on consequently it was removed even for the global superpowers of the G8, and now we are having only the G7. And on the other hand, but among the other countries, after USA, UK was considered to be a global power, but now this is not the case. And to fight USA, a group called European Union has formed. Later on, we all have seen how UK has came out of the European Union. These are things that are happening one by one, and USA is still the only global power. And USA, ever since Donald Trump has become the president, clearly he is giving utmost importance to Saudi Arabia and even India, but not considering European Union or any country in the European Union to be the front runner in establishing the peace. What's his opinion? Only he knows. But yes, even when US and Russia presidents are meeting, in a very short while, European Union leaders have met separately in Paris. Whether this particular summit is important or not, we already know that, because if at all European Union talks are so much important, they could have shown effect on Russia-Ukraine war very much before. United States is nowhere related to Russia-Ukraine, but whereas European Union is definitely related because both the countries are in Europe only. But they are trying to show their presence in somewhere or the other. We have to agree to this. Even UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has uploaded a video in his social media. Speaking in Paris after an emergency summit in the European leaders, the Prime Minister said a US backstop is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again. He simply agreed that US pressure could only deter Russia, not of any other union. Any peace deal for Ukraine must safeguard its sovereignty and deter Russian leader Vladimir Putin from engaging in further aggression in the future, Sarkar has added. And let's watch the video, what he has uploaded in his personal social media.
Our continent must prevail. I want to thank President Macron for
was the
I want to thank
visuals of the European Union meeting on ending the Russia-Ukraine war. So literally speaking, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has agreed that only Donald Trump could pressure Russia to stop the war. On the other hand, the Kremlin said that Riyadh talks may bring clarity on a possible meeting between Trump and Putin, which both men have said they are keen to hold. Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. We all know this. 8 years after seizing Crimea and fomenting an insurgency in the east of the country. It now controls about a fifth of the country. Trump ran for president last year and an oft-repeated promise to end the conflict within 24 hours, though his officials now concede it will take months. He has described the war as ridiculous and said that it is destroying Russia. Moscow, however, has sounded increasingly confident in recent months as its troops have advanced at their fastest pace since 2022, and Trump's overtures have ended its near total isolation from the West. Under Trump's predecessor, Joe Biden, the Kremlin has described relations as below zero. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrived in Saudi Arabia of Riyadh after his trip to Israel. He is leading a delegation to the kingdom for direct talks with Russian officials on ending Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. The trip to Saudi comes ahead of expected talks with Russian officials aimed at ending Moscow's nearly 3-year war in Ukraine. The talks come after President Donald Trump last week spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin by phone and ordered top officials to begin negotiations on the war, which he repeatedly vowed to end during his presidential campaign. Riyadh, which is also involved in talks with Washington over further or future of the Gaza Strip, and so this particular meeting in Riyadh is question mark of both the wars, both Israel-Hamas war and also Russia-Ukraine war. So whether this particular talks will be fulfilled, whether this will lead to ceasefire or whether the crossfire will continue, we have to wait and watch. US officials cast Tuesday's talks as an initial contact to determine whether Moscow is serious about ending the war after Putin and Trump spoke last Wednesday. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters on Tuesday that President Putin has been repeating his words about his readiness for peace talks from the very beginning. But he also said any agreement with Ukraine would have to take into account a possible challenge to legitimacy of Zelensky, who has remained in power beyond the end of his normal term because Ukraine is under the martial law. The Kremlin had suggested that discussions would cover the entire complex of Russian-American relations. Putin and Trump have said that apart from the war, they are keen to discuss issues such as nuclear arms control and how to bring down global energy prices. Under Biden, the United States provided many tens of billions of dollars worth of weapons and aid to Ukraine and joined other Western governments in slapping waves of sanctions on Russia. Moscow says it has withstood the sanctions and that they have rebounded on those who imposed them. US businesses lost around $300 billion from leaving Russia. So there is a huge economic toll on many countries from what's happening right now. Kirill Dmitriev, the head of Russia's sovereign wealth fund, told reporters in Riyadh. Russia said Lavrov and Rubio in a call on Saturday discussed removing barriers to trade and investment. Now this is a very important thing. The trade and investments plays a vital role in either starting or ending the war. And this particular trade and investment interest only plays a vital role. And only if the war stops the trade and investments will be resuming. But war will also start based upon the economic feasibility and even showing of the supremacy. But to end the war, always trade and investments plays a vital role, and this is what the picture is, and in that way Donald Trump is proceeding to his meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Your Highness, Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor.
We built the connection with my short time. I believe he like direct of for me, having a friend in a short period, but he's a amazing person, and I believe, and you believe we have a lot of things to talk about bilateral and also in the region and other areas. So we more than glad to work with you and with President Trump and the administration. I believe we can do a lot of positive things for Saudi Arabia and America, and also for many countries around the world. So you know.
Your Highness, Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor.
We built the connection with my short time. I believe he like direct of for me, having a friend in a short period, but he's a amazing person, and I believe, as you know, he doesn't me, but thank you, sir. We're going to have you today, and as you believe, we have a lot of things to talk about bilateral and also in the region and other areas. So we're more than glad to work with you and with President Trump and the administration. I believe we can do a lot of positive things for Saudi Arabia and America, and also for many countries around the world. So you know.
Your Highness, Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor.
We built the connection with my short time. I believe he like direct of for me, having a friend in a short period, but he's a amazing person, and I believe, as you know, he doesn't me, but thank you, sir. We're going to have you today, and as you believe, we have a lot of things to talk about bilateral and also in the region and other areas. So we're more than glad to work with you and with President Trump and the administration. I believe we can do a lot of positive things for Saudi Arabia and America, and also for many countries around the world. So you know.
Your Highness, Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor.
We built the connection with my short time. I believe he like direct of
Those are the visuals what we have seen just now, or the meeting between the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince and the US Secretary of State. Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman received US Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Riyadh, Saudi media reported, and the first visit by the US official in his new position. The meeting at the Diriyah Palace in Riyadh marks another pivotal step by the Trump administration to reverse US policy on isolating Russia, and is meant to pave the way for the meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump earlier this month appended US policy towards Ukraine and Russia by saying he and Putin had agreed to begin negotiations on ending the war. Rubio is in Saudi Arabia for talks with Russia on Ukraine. Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov said the talks could focus on ending the war in Ukraine and restoring the border Russia. US ties to be broader with Russia, this is what he meant. Riyadh, which is also involved in talks with Washington over the future of Gaza. And this particular meeting between the US Secretary of State and Saudi Crown Prince is very much important, because it is the first step in arranging the meeting between Trump and Putin.
Thank you.
Российским. Российское мы видим, что здесь Лавров и помощник президента Юрий Ушаков.
Thank you.
In an address to UN Security Council on Monday, the UK Ambassador Barbara Woodward strongly criticized Russia's actions in Ukraine and pledged her country's support for the Ukraine's sovereignty. Let's watch the visual of her address to the United Nations. In an address to UN Security Council on Monday, the UK Ambassador Barbara Woodward strongly criticized
It's illegal war. President, Russia is once again using this meeting in an attempt to distort the truth behind its illegal war. I'll make 3 points about lessons. First, the events of the last decade in Ukraine originate from a simple, sad reality. Russia's imperialist ambition and failure to respect Ukraine's sovereignty. Russia is not a reliable party to agreements or treaties. In freely signing up to the Minsk agreements, Russia had the opportunity to ensure peace. No one wants this war to end more than Ukraine. But Putin's so-called preconditions for talks, reaffirmed by his deputy foreign minister just a few days ago, have been that Ukraine withdraw from its own sovereign territory and abandon its sovereign right to choose its alliances. No country could or should accept this. So we can and must create the conditions for a just and lasting peace, which protects Ukraine's security, sovereignty, and independence. This will require robust security arrangements from the outset, which ensure that Russia is never able to invade again. Putin has shown time and again.
At the Munich Security Conference on February 14, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Ukraine is not currently discussing any peace agreement. He expressed regret over the ongoing conflict, which has lasted for 3 years, causing numerous deaths and widespread destruction, particularly of lives. Zelensky attributed the war to Russian President Vladimir Putin, emphasizing that it was his action alone that led to the crisis. Zelensky highlighted the need for a strong support from the United States, particularly from a strong President Donald Trump, who he believes should be an ally of Ukraine in this matter. His comments came just after Trump's held separate calls with both Putin and Zelensky. Trump had stated after his call with Putin on February 12 that two leaders had agreed to begin negotiations to end the war in Ukraine immediately. The Ukrainian president further explained that any potential peace deal should focus on a plan to end the war with an agreement made between Ukraine and US. US President and any supported by both parties. Zelensky also underscored Europe's significant role in such a deal. In his speech, Zelensky referred the historical Munich Agreement, warning that peace talks should not be conducted in the Munich due to the significance of the past agreements made there, particularly one that allowed Germany to annex the Sudetenland. He emphasized that a peaceful deal could not be signed in Munich for this reason. Zelensky stated that he would only be willing to meet with Putin after a joint plan has been developed with President Trump and European Union. He also noted that both he and Trump has agreed to start working towards ending war with Russia. Meanwhile, the Kremlin announced that it had begun forming a group for talks with the US, including discussions on the war with Ukraine.
He gave me.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin announced that it had begun forming a group for talks with the US, including discussions on the war.
I said to President, yes, but I think phone calls are phone calls. Let's forget about it. I think what is very important, the meeting, not to make any decisions about Ukraine without Ukraine. This is principal position we will never accept it. And when I said that we will never accept, I'm not speaking just about me. I'm speaking about all our people, all our nation. People will not stop. We will give him pause. Without real security guarantees, we will give him pause. I don't want to, be those person in the history who helped Putin to occupy my country. I don't want it. I will never do it. To make a deal without us or without Europe is not a good idea, and I hope that President Trump doesn't have this idea. I count on it very much.
Yeah, I'm very okay with Trump talking to Putin.
But I endorse Lindsay's view that
I think that the United States need to be together with Europe supporting Ukraine. That's why it's politically, it's a message to Putin. It's politically, not even with army, not because of the number of the troops. Politically, it's very important to stay together. And when it's security guarantees from the United States and Europe, it have to be together. That's why it's necessary to stay together in Ukraine if we see like a part of globally, like a part of security guarantees for Ukraine, the part contingents. Yes, to have such big army. We really had good conversation with President Trump. Yes, he gave me his telephone number. By the way, it was funny. I can tell you. I think that President Trump will not be against it. I will open you. I said to him that this idea with the date to come to you, I said to him, without date, I said to him, I think it's genius.
You want to call him now?
No, otherwise you will always have his number. No, I know. No, I said to him, yeah, and he said, you can call me anytime you want. I said to him, yes, thank you so much. But previous time you said me that you can call me directly anytime and didn't give me your phone number. And he said, okay, yes, okay, right, yes, you can call anytime, and really, I hope, and we count that really President Trump will help us. And idea with the date to come to you, I said to him, without date, I said to him, I think it's genius.
You want to call him now?
No, otherwise you will always have his number. No, I know. No, I said to him, yeah, and he said, you can call me anytime you want. I said to him, yes, thank you so much. But previous time you said me that you can call me directly anytime and didn't give me your phone number. I said to him, yes, thank you so much.
US Secretary of State Rubio and US Russian advisor Yuri Ushakov, along with other diplomats, are expected to pave the way forward for the negotiations between Putin and Trump about ending the Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine. Though Ushakov says the US did not yet appoint its main negotiator for Tuesday's discussion, he confirmed Russia's Foreign Affairs Minister and Russian Direct Investment Fund CEO Kirill Dmitriev will partake in his conversation with Rubio, which first will focus on restoring relations between the US and Russia. Regarding the potential of Ukraine's involvement in peace talks, which Trump said would happen, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Monday that Ukraine did not know anything about the negotiations. Though Zelensky is scheduled to visit Saudi Arabia on Wednesday, he said that it was planned in advance but was not related to Russia's talks with the US. Ukraine regards any negotiations on Ukraine without Ukraine as ones that have no results.
That would have caused me a big problem because you just can't let that happen. I think he wants to end it, and they want to end it fast. Both of them. And Zelensky wants to end it too.
Україна не братиме, Україна про це нічого не знала, а Україна розцінює будь-які переговори про Україну без України як які не мають результату, і ми не можемо визнавати будь-які речі або будь-які домовленості.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Monday his country won't take part in US-Russia talks this week on ending the war and won't accept the outcome if Ukraine doesn't take part. Speaking to journalists on a conference call from the United Arab Emirates, Zelensky said his government has not been invited to Tuesday's planned talks in Saudi Arabia. He said that they would yield no results given the absence of any Ukrainian officials. Zelensky said he would travel to Turkey on Monday and set to Saudi Arabia on Wednesday. But his trip to the Arab nation was unrelated to planned US-Russia talks there on Tuesday. Top Russian officials will hold talks with US counterparts on restoring ties, negotiating a peaceful settlement to the war in Ukraine, and preparing a meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump, the Kremlin said. As what he said, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has visited Turkey on Tuesday upon the invitation of President Erdogan, the Turkish Presidency Communications Director said. In a statement on X, Fahrettin Altun said Zelensky and Erdogan will discuss ways to improve cooperation and bilateral ties, the latest development in Ukraine, as well as the regional and global issues. Zelensky's visit will coincide with talks between Russia and United States on Tuesday in Saudi Arabia aimed at ending the war in Ukraine and restoring broader Russia-US ties.
go back if I can.
And that's the special story on the most important event that's happening in the world now, ceasefire or crossfire. Summarizing this particular event, yes, Ukrainian President Zelensky has reached Turkey. At any time, we can expect a press conference between Erdogan and Zelensky. And on the other hand, we can receive the news about the possible meeting between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. So continuously, we will be keeping updating about these events. Keep watching CVR News English.